we need to demand accountability from our elected officials. And if the majority party isn't doing what Iowans want, they have an alternative. They need to raise awareness now during the lawmaking process. And then in 2026, it might be time for a change.
Welcome to Cornhole Champions, a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line, where we throw bags at the state's biggest stories. I'm Zachary Oren Smith. It's Wednesday, and I'm joined today by Iowa Starting Line's community editor, Amie Rivers. Thanksgiving is a time for family and food, and maybe you're already looking for a bit of a break. We talk turkey while you wait for the turkey to come out. Hear from Senate Democratic Minority Leader Jennifer Konfrst about how her party is preparing for the upcoming session. Amie and I discuss a new post-election survey on how many voters were impacted by the state's last-minute requirements for voters and the impact of our state's 6-week abortion ban on Iowans looking for health care. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions.
So, Amie, do you have any Thanksgiving traditions?
I used to make the turkey when we used to have it at my grandma's house before she passed. And so I would go out and get this turkey. And of course, I wanted to get like a free-range turkey. So I paid a whole bunch of money for it at the market. And then I would, have to thaw this huge turkey and then, go over to my grandma's house at like 6 a.m. and pop it in the oven. Or, prepare it first and then pop it in the oven. So I got pretty good at it.
You're a vegetarian. Did that have anything to do? Was there some Thanksgiving debacle that led to vegetarianism in your household?
No, I think I did a pretty good job on the turkey. Like once I got a couple years under my belt and realized how I needed to, keep it moist and everything like that. But and then of course I realized that I had to keep in all the parts that I wanted to throw out, like the neck. And the liver and the heart and things, because there are members of my family that like to eat them. So,
well, that's because they're the objectively good parts of the bird.
Are they?
Oh, Amie, all the flavors in the neck. That's just the fact of the matter.
What do you do with it?
You brown it a little bit. You get that in the pan. You brown that. Good drippings to be had from the that. There's also, you incorporate it into your soups. Stocks, Amie?
Okay.
Amie, have you had a good stock?
I do vegetarian bouillon now, so no.
Bouillon, but better than bouillon. I know they got some kind of collagen in there, right?
Yeah,
Surely.
it's good stuff. Yeah.
So yes, I'm one of those. I'm like one of your weird cousins that love the turkey neck. That keep the turkey neck.
What's your Thanksgiving tradition?
My Thanksgiving tradition. So I've been away from home for a long time. I moved to Iowa about 8 years ago, and so I've been for me to go visit family. It's like a 13-hour drive in order to make that happen, right? So we don't tend to come home for Thanksgiving. But when I am home, a dish that I adore, it's called oyster dressing. Have you had this before?
No.
So you get a couple cans of smoked oysters, right? A couple cans of smoked oysters. You get like 50% cornbread, 50% kind of regular, I don't know, like corn muffin mix. And you turn it, you like melt just a ton of butter, just a shit ton of butter, like a little bit of like onion, celery, carrot. It creates what is one of the tastiest, loaves in the world. I love this stuff. I'm crazy about this stuff.
And the oyster is the secret.
Oh, it's smoky. Oh, it gives that smoky kind of fishy stank. Do you know what I'm saying?
You like the fishy stank in your cornbread?
Oh, I love the fishy stank. Well, in the dressing specifically. Cornbread's an additive. Cornbread's a delivery module, right?
Okay, I got you.
I can't get enough of this stuff, and so I will sit there by myself eating my fishy dressing while everyone else eats everything else.
And you're dressing over stuffing, because we have this debate often about what it's actually called.
It's funny. I think there's I'm a Southerner, and I think there's a correct Southern answer to this question, but I'm not actually sure what it is. I guess I've been in the Midwest so long that I kind of drift between the two. Dressing, stuffing. It's that tasty casserole thing that's on the that's by the turkey. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that's fine position to take in Iowa, because I think a lot of the old folks call it dressing, and it's more like a millennials and younger that call it stuffing, from what I understand.
Oh, interesting. It's a generational divide. I thought it was regional
maybe.
cultural.
The regional cultural stuff goes away because everybody's got the national, the international mindset now, and I think stuffing is winning that war.
Stuffing is winning the war. Well, I'm an
Isn't that
underdog. I
sad?
always take the underdog, so I guess I'm team dressing now all the
Yeah,
way.
there you go.
I now have politics about it. And, being cornhole champions and not bags champions, I mean, like, we're very familiar with the kind of the regional cultural divisions in our comment section.
Yes.
Folks that won't leave us alone.
We like these debates.
Our first story, hundreds of Iowans had additional barriers to clear before they could vote this year. Just weeks before Election Day, Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate produced a secret list of voters he claimed were registered to vote illegitimately. This week, the Des Moines Register published a survey of 97 of Iowa's 99 counties and found that the majority of people on Pate's list who came to vote were able to prove their citizenship and vote. Amie, had you heard about this story?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that register thing. It was very interesting because obviously, like, less than 30% of the people on the list came to vote. First of all, can you like back us up and tell us what was this list in the first place?
Yeah, so it began back in October. Secretary of State Paul Pate came out saying that there was this list that he had gotten from the Department of Transportation, right? A list of over 2,000 names that had been compared against voter rolls. And in doing so, they had found that there was a certain number of people who had checked a box saying that they were not citizens, told the DMV that they were not citizens, but had registered to vote or had voted in an election previously, right? Which, if you're not a citizen, you're not able to vote in a U.S. election.
Right. Yeah.
And the point, right, was to prevent people who weren't eligible to vote from being able to vote, right? However, even Paul Pate acknowledged that this data was deeply flawed. Our reporting at Iowa Starting Line showed that at least for the last 2 years, Pate's office has been aware of some of the shortcomings of this Department of Transportation data. But nonetheless, a couple of weeks before Election Day, Paul Pate felt the need to go ahead and use this flawed data to add barriers before voters, particularly new citizens, were able to vote.
Yeah, and that strikes me as like an odd timing, right? I mean, Paul Pate has generally not, given in to these stop the steal people, and he's really tried to keep Iowa elections accessible to a lot of people.
Right.
So this kind of caught a lot of people off guard, I think. What was the timing? What did you make of that?
Yeah, it was really close to an election. Paul Pate announced the list on October 22nd. The election day was 3 weeks later. It's totally fine for a Secretary of State, for an auditor, to go through each year and make sure that they're cleaning up voter logs. For people who've passed away, you want to make sure that they're off voter logs so you don't have dead people voting in U.S. elections, right? It's an important part of like kind of keeping up with this system.
Sure.
But Iowa code, federal law has pretty strict rules about how close to a U.S. election, how close to election day you're able to do these kinds of voter roll cleanup jobs, right? And in this case, it happened just within 3 weeks of Election Day, which, for people like me, that was a big red flag, right? Particularly when we're using flawed data to do it.
Yeah, and these voters, I mean, if you look at that Des Moines Register story, they interviewed voters about having to jump through additional hoops. This one woman brought her passport,
Right.
which is like even more secure document of identification than like your regular driver's license, and was still turned away. Like, is there going to be any blowback for this for Paul Pate?
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? So in Iowa, we have a voter ID. Voter ID is kind of the law of the land. You have to prove that you have a valid photo ID, that you are a eligible voter in order to cast that ballot, right? Most folks I use a driver's license, for example, to vote. But this additional barrier, right, required documentation of citizenship, right? And then there are I'm not going to get into like the specifics of like kind of what can prove it, but like a document like a passport had to be flashed at the point at the precinct in order for a ballot to be cast, right? And while I think everyone is kind of at this point on board with voter ID, maybe a couple folks disagree with me there. This is a kind of a exacerbation, right, of kind of existing strictures, right? And when we talk about when you talk about kind of like will there be blowback? I mean, I think there is some concern about, okay, so if so a couple weeks from a U.S. election, you're willing to just add this kind of additional thing where, campaigns where electeds haven't been preparing folks for these additional hurdles. I think there's concern from folks like LULAC, Iowa, that maybe that this might have a chilling effect on voters who did show up, but maybe maybe they didn't understand why they weren't allowed to cast a ballot at that point, right? Maybe they didn't understand whether through language barrier or through circumstance, that they needed to cure their ballot, that they needed to show additional identification at a later date in order to have that ballot cast. I can see like a lot of concerns about kind of how this went down, but ultimately I'm not sure whether any blowback, whether there'll be any kind of issue or changes made based on how this went down.
Which is disappointing.
Yeah, I hear that. Second story. During the summers, many children lose reliable access to meals. The USDA has a program that gives $120 per child to low-income families for food purchases during the summer to help make ends meet. All states have to do is elect to participate, but Iowa has refused these funds, opting instead for an alternative program using food boxes. The USDA has declined to fund Iowa's food boxes. It's estimated that summer EBT, the summer program provided by the USDA, would provide 8.8 million meals to 245,000 Iowan children.
You've also written about this. You wrote about this in October. I've written about this. The Iowa Hunger Coalition called a press conference. We've been talking about this for a while.
Right.
What was this latest press conference about?
Yeah, this week during a press conference, anti-hunger activists, specifically the Iowa Hunger Coalition, asked the state to reconsider participating in the program, saying the state should trust parents to make the best food choices for their children and support them directly in doing so, right? There's tons of evidence to support that when we give direct payments as opposed to, so kind of stipulated programs or even food boxes, parents are better able to make nutritional decisions for their own households. It's not an either or. The state of Iowa could both participate in this USDA program while also working to better provide for food boxes at some of its meal sites. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, but the state's been really unwilling to kind of work with the USDA on this. Iowa Starting Line's Nicole Hittrick was at the press conference. You can read her story at iowastartingline.com. She goes into a little more depth about kind of what they're recommending. That one, they want the state to raise income eligibility for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program called SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. Two, they want the state to invest in the existing Double Up Food Bucks program, incentivizing more access to fresh fruits and vegetables, that sort of thing. And three, they want the state to get more eligible Iowans on SNAP and nutritional programs like WIC. Right now, the current numbers should suggest that there are less than 50% of eligible Iowans participating in these programs, in SNAP, in WIC. These really important nutritional assistance programs. And as a last item, they want the state to explore providing free school breakfast and lunch to students who already qualify for reduced price meals. Anyone familiar with reporting on schools is probably familiar with reduced and free numbers, right? So it's a really important indicator for economic precarity of a particular student, of a student body, of a school, a neighborhood, et cetera. Right now, the state already kind of recognizes that there are certain students who meet the qualifications for free lunch. There are others that only meet qualifications for reduced price lunch, school lunch. They're saying, why, if we're already recognizing that these are students that are under economic strain, let's go ahead and make, these meals, these lunches, these breakfasts free to these students that need it, right? If we want students to succeed. It's important that they get fed. Amie, do you have any, I'm kind of familiar with the problems that people at the coalition are pointing to. Do you have any sense of how we got to this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a horrible conglomeration of a bunch of things happening at once, right? You've got the food banks saying that demand is way up, and they've been saying that since the pandemic.
Right.
1 in 6 working Iowa households can't cover the cost of their basic needs. So food is generally one of those things that starts happening when you really start getting squeezed. Food prices have increased 25% in the last 4 years. housing prices have increased, rent has increased, and wages have not increased. So that's putting a squeeze on people already.
Right.
Also, bookend that with the fact that Iowa Republicans have been passing policies that restrict access to food, right? So they decided to, pass a SNAP restriction bill in 2023. Reynolds declining the federal funding for the summer EBT program is just an extension of that. So you've sort of got all of these things coming together, not helping the crisis situation at our food banks.
I mean, Reynolds has thus far rejected extending summer EBT with USDA. She's opted for these boxes. These boxes have been denied by the USDA. Is there like a pathway to getting summer EBT in the next year?
Yeah, her office could literally allow the department to apply for summer EBT. They just have to do that by January 1st of next year. So basically, in a month, they could apply for summer EBT, and then we wouldn't have to worry about this problem. It's unlikely that Reynolds will change her mind absent a big push to do so, because she already has said that she doesn't believe that it's a worthwhile program, not only for the fees, something like $2.2 million in fees that the state has to pony up in order to administer the program, but also because she actually thinks that SNAP and summer feeding contributes to childhood obesity.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Feeding them kids contributing to obesity.
Right.
I mean, is there any evidence that this is contributing to obesity in any meaningful way?
There is not. Nicole has actually looked into this and found that there's no correlation between increased childhood obesity and SNAP programs.
And if you want to read Nicole Hittrick's reporting again, go to iowastartingline.com. For our third story, new data from the Guttmacher Institute says abortions dropped in Iowa in the months following the heartbeat law going into effect. It's kind of a no-dust story, but it put some numbers to what we all kind of anticipated would happen following the passage of the law. In the first half of the year, there were, on average, 400 clinician-provided abortions in Iowa per month. That dropped by 35% following the change. In the first half of the year, there were, on average, 400 clinician-provided abortions in Iowa per month, but that dropped by 35% following this change. Amie, we're obviously seeing the impact of this 6-week abortion ban in this data. This is the first year of rollout, right? So these are this is the kind of immediate shock to demand. We saw in this data, right, more folks traveling out of state to receive this healthcare, to receive these procedures. Obviously, Iowans are receiving fewer in-state options to receive that care.
Yeah, Nicole's story really tells it. And others have done this story as well. Like, in 1 month, abortions dropped from an estimated 400 to 250 between July and August of this year.
Right.
And I mean, do you think it's because people aren't needing these abortions? I mean, Planned Parenthood says that interest in going out of state to find out of state providers has increased 159%.
Right. I mean, I think that speaks to it, right? I think that speaks to just the amount of demand not decreasing. Groups like the Iowa Abortion Access Fund, right, are reporting that they're spending more and more of their funding to get folks solutions that are outside of the state that used to be available, in their communities, or maybe even if it was a long drive, it was still a little bit more available.
Right.
So no, I don't think anything in this report seems to suggest that demand for the procedure has decreased.
Of course not. It's always been steady, obviously, since even before Roe v. Wade.
Totally.
I mean, people were getting it done on the sly. Yeah. But at least Iowans support this policy. Right, Zachary?
There is no evidence to support that fewer people are not only needing them, but or that any more people are supporting this kind of restrictive law. Polling from the Des Moines Register and from Midwest Newsroom have found time and time again that Iowans find the 6-week abortion ban too strict, and they disapproved of its passage.
Yeah. No, Iowans don't like this. I mean, if we could put it on the ballot measure, we cannot. That's also why they haven't brought it to us as a constitutional amendment, right? Let's be honest. Like, it's out there. It could be easily brought to us. They know what would happen based on the polling if they did.
I'm sure those who are in the anti-abortion movement see fewer abortions as a win. What's been the fallout from the kind of the passage of this 6-week abortion ban?
So, I mean, besides just being an annoyance, a frustration, a hardship on women who actually need this care, you're basically telling Iowa small businesses, Iowa workers, that they're not allowed to do it. So they're not making money off of these things, right? They're not seeing patients because of these things. And they're all going out of state. And that's a big problem in Iowa, which already is at the bottom of the list for OBGYNs per capita. I mean, you're seeing rural birth wards closing. You're seeing 61 of our 99 counties without a single OBGYN. It's like 41 mostly rural birthing units closed between 2000 and 2021. So you're already seeing longer trips. You're seeing fewer options for routine maternal care. That's a problem whether you're trying to have abortion or actually have a healthy baby, right?
Right.
And it's all connected. I mean, especially people that are facing miscarriages, facing complications for wanted children that need to abort.
Right.
This is a big problem. You're denying health care to a large segment of the population. And of course, many things impact where a newly minted doctor chooses to put down roots, but there's some evidence to support that when states pass these restrictive policies, medical students choose to apply elsewhere. And in fact, the University of Iowa was just saying that that's what's happening down there. Enrollment is down in these programs. And that's a big, big deal. I mean, when you are recruiting students for these programs and all of a sudden you're not, we can't afford to lose any more people in this state.
I think there's a lot of ways to feel about abortion in the United States, right? Like I don't think everyone has to be on the same page. At least under the current issue, there have been problems with protecting the life of the mother, right? That we keep saying that this is like an exception that we support, but in practice, right, existing regulation is insufficient for direction for doctors to evaluate. Is this in fact, the swan song of this pregnant woman, right?
Right.
I don't know. So we're going to be watching this story. This is going to be something that we at Iowa Starting Line are going to be paying a lot of attention to, and it will become all the more important as we head in January to the Iowa legislative session.
Right.
For our cornhole matchup this week, I've got a heavy hitter. I wanted to get us to start thinking a little bit more about this session. We go back in January, and Iowa Republicans will have a larger majority than they did in the previous session. Senate Democrats just named Senator Janice Weiner of Iowa City as their leader. To get us ready for when session returns, I wanted to hear from someone who knows the ins and outs of the Iowa Legislature. Jennifer Konfrst is the Democratic House Minority Leader. Off session, she's involved in campaigns across the state trying to get Democrats elected in some of these contested seats. They didn't have a great 2024 election, and right now they're thinking about kind of what that future looks like. How can they retool to better their odds? During the session, she's trying to make the most out of her minority seat. So I thought we'd sit down with Konfrst and get a sense of that road ahead. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions. Jennifer Konfrst, thanks for joining us. Do you mind if I call you Jennifer?
Not at all.
I wanted to begin with, I think for a lot of folks, when a new legislative session begins, they have no idea kind of what these names and titles mean. And I think for some, a minority leader may be on the more obscure side of that coin. Can you walk me through kind of what you think, how you explain the role of a minority leader in state government?
You bet. My job as minority leader in the Iowa House is to lead the minority caucus. And that means the caucus that is not in the majorities. So in this case, of course, it's the Democrats. And my job is to lead our floor strategy, our caucus, as we determine our priorities, and to work on committee structure, to essentially be the first voice for Democrats on the floor of the Iowa House. When there's conflict or when there are things we need to decide, that's my job. It's an elected position. My caucus elects me to do this.
Walk me through, how does the caucus begin to develop its sense of priorities, its sense of where does that begin?
I'm really glad you asked, because we're getting ready to do that here in mid-December. So we as a caucus come together, and none of us worked this hard so that we can come up here and vote no. we work so that we can actually affect policy and do what our constituents want. And so we will come together in December and we will brainstorm our priorities. And over the past couple of years, they've fallen into 4 different categories, and those are based on listening to Iowans. In 2023, we went around and did 21 listening sessions in red districts where we asked people, what do you think? And the things that they came up with and the things that data showed us across the state are reproductive freedom, public education, lowering costs, and legalizing marijuana. Those 4 things have been our priorities for a while now. In December, we'll come together, see if those still fit and what bills we want to introduce in those lanes.
This episode will air on Wednesday morning, and we're a ways out from the session beginning, but we are pretty close to this past election. One of the major responsibilities, right, for the minority leader is to kind of marshal the elections for districts across the state. There were a number of pretty close and pretty contested district races, some of which went for Democrats, some of which didn't. I wonder if at this point, now that we're a couple weeks away from Election Day, if you have a sense of kind of what went right and what went wrong.
Yeah. My job as minority leader is to get us to the majority. And so this year we missed the mark, and, Republicans picked up seats, which was certainly not what the data showed us would happen, and certainly not what we wanted, obviously. We were proud that we were able to win 5 seats that Donald Trump won, which tells us that we were right on the issues and got swept up in a national wave. But we still have a lot to figure out here. Once we know the voter file, we'll learn more. And we're ready to change, ready to ask those hard questions. But what I can tell you is that in several of our contested races, even here in the metro in Des Moines, we almost won, we almost brought Molly Buck back, fewer than 200 votes. We almost brought Heather Severs in and beat Bill Gustav. So we came close in a few races, which makes it tough as well, because just right there. But we had 82 candidates across the state who worked their tails off. And, we talked about, in this order, reproductive freedom, the economy, and public education. And those 3 issues are still ones that Iowans are with us on. We just got to spend some time figuring out how come that message didn't resonate as far as we wanted it to.
I'm thinking of his name y'all flipped. It was Matt.
Matt Blake flipped Brad Zahn's seat in the Senate.
Thank you very much. Walk me through. Do you have any sense of what was different about that particular district that had him performing?
Yeah, I don't know yet. On the Senate, and we haven't looked at the Senate seats quite as much, but certainly it was a pretty targeted race, and the district is trending away from Republicans there. But we tried to flip that House seat and weren't able to get that done. We just don't know yet. We got to look and see on the data in January who voted and why.
For sure.
But what we do know is that the issues that Iowans care about are still the issues that we're with them on. So we need to spend the next 2 years pointing out that Republicans aren't listening. Republicans are playing politics while we're putting them first.
And talking about kind of the work y'all are doing in the legislature, can you walk me through kind of, in September, you had a press conference announcing some of the priorities for the caucus. I wonder, in light of this election, had those priorities changed any?
Yeah, I think that what we need to do is we need to continue to show Iowans what we would do if we were in charge. That's why we unleashed an agenda in September. That's why we'll tweak it now as we come together as a caucus with new members. But look, we're going to continue to fight for working families in the state. We're going to continue to fight for reproductive freedom, continue to fight for public schools. Those haven't changed. What the legislation that we propose looks like might.
Okay.
And that's what we'll do. We'll plan as a caucus here in December. But look, we've already done a lot of things that Republicans have ignored that are right up the alley that Iowans tell us they want.
Right. And maybe talk a little bit about the work to ban wage theft in the state. Can you walk me through that legislation?
So, we have now 3 people who actively work for labor unions in the state in our caucus. And we're all supportive of the work of our working brothers and sisters across the state. And one of the things that we've seen chipping away at workers' rights is the idea of wage theft, where people are, just wrongly classifying people for jobs so that they don't have to pay as much, or, not giving people the pay that they deserve. We introduced legislation to specifically ban that practice and force businesses to pay people fairly and force them to use a competitive wage and all the processes that are in place. We introduced that bill. Republicans ignored it.
Yeah. And walk me through, I think you have some plans for public and private sector union creating strength behind its ability to collectively bargain. Can you walk me through what exactly that would mean?
We're really proud of this one. We, as I said, we stand with working families, and a lot of that has to do with your right to determine your own future in your workplace. And so we introduced legislation, a constitutional amendment, to enshrine the right to collectively bargain into Iowa's constitution. It's bold, it's big, and it's really important so that people have the right to have dignity in the workplace and get the wages they deserve, Republicans ignored the bill again.
Why would the ability to collectively bargain help a worker? Can you walk me through?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really important because if you join together to demand better working conditions, better wages, better benefits, then you are collectively a force that is equal to management. And together, you can make sure that you're fighting for each other for a fair contract, fair wages. You can do it in a way that you're not just at the mercy of what management wants, but you as employees bond together and speak out on behalf of what employees deserve in the workplace. It helps keep people safe, it helps keep people employed, and it helps make sure they're given a fair wage.
It would be a serious change to the kind of current, what's on the books for, particularly for public sector employees. I live in Iowa City, and we have a number of University of Iowa employees who, based on their public sector affiliation, right, don't have the same kind of rights to collectively bargain.
Yeah, I mean, those rights were taken away in 2017 through Chapter 20 revisions. And actually, that's why I decided to run for office again. I lost when I first ran in 2016, and I watched. I had knocked on 13,000 doors, and not a soul said we need to gut collective bargaining in the state. And that's one of the first things they did, and it infuriated me. So I ran again. And so, these rights are about dignity. They're about people who just want to put food on the table, giving them the chance to do that fairly, and for a company that isn't just looking out for the bottom line, but is looking out for workers, which, by the way, is looking out for the bottom line.
Another major cost, I think, for working families, for working peoples, is affordable housing, right? What are for House Democrats? I mean, do y'all have a plan for what decreasing the cost of housing would look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with supply and demand, right? We have a huge shortage of affordable housing in the state. When I say affordable housing, I don't mean low-income housing. I mean housing that Iowans can afford. And so that involves looking at creative ways to repurpose existing structure. Maybe we look at businesses around the state as people have started to work remotely. Can we repurpose those office spaces into apartments? We need to look at improving our existing housing stock so that we don't have to tear down as housing becomes dilapidated. How can we provide mini grants for people to fix their windows, fix their roof across the state, but also new construction incentives, making sure that people are building in communities where it's necessary across the state. We just need to look at this issue holistically. So we've had bills on those mini grants. We've had bills to re-examine where affordable housing options exist, and also just looking at new construction. How can we work together to make this actually affordable?
Yeah. If in your mind, what does drive the housing affordability issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's supply, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the fact that on any given day, there are more people looking for houses than can buy houses. Right. And I think also down payment assistance is important. We as a economy have switched from a 20% down payment, in the 90s. We got to a 0% down payment, which caused some troubles in 2007, 2008. You can watch The Big Short to see why. And then we've been real cautious coming back there. But housing affordability is truly it's a generational wealth creator. If someone can own a home and achieve that American dream of ownership, a lot of people right now feel like that's not in their plans, and they deserve that. So what can we do? That's how we keep people here, is if we can have an affordable place for them to live.
Yeah, I mean, it's much cheaper to buy a home in even our metros versus a Chicago metro versus one of these kind of bigger job markets. Yeah. Thinking about down payments in particular, I know this is something me and my wife it's something we worry about. It's like, how are we going to find the savings given debt payments, given all these kind of economic headwinds? Have you seen other states do work that works? So what helps with that?
I mean, down payment assistance to help first-time home buyers, right? I mean, there are a lot of programs like that have ebbed and flowed. We've got some programs right now, like a housing trust that we can, fund more. A housing trust fund, excuse me. But I think if there are ways to have matching funds for families, just like we do for loan repayment programs for medical professionals who we want to live in rural areas, can we provide, down payment assistance for families that choose to live in a rural community or in a small town, so that we can actually grow the community and bring in new families, fresh faces. But a lot of what we're seeing is that businesses find great regions to locate in Iowa, but they don't have the housing for their workers. And that's becoming incredibly important as we look at keeping up and bringing more businesses in, their employees have to have someplace to live.
Yeah. A close friend right now is in the prime. They just had a newborn, right? Really exciting news. But one of the challenges, they didn't realize they needed to go ahead and try to get on a wait list for childcare. Walk me through for House Democrats how you approach that like very lived reality that folks are just. I mean, you got to. The baby's not a glimmer in someone's eye before you got to get on that wait list.
Yeah, I mean, when my kid's 24 and I called from the hospital to get her on the list because she had to be born before I could get her on a childcare list, right?
Totally.
And yeah, I mean, this is a challenge for a lot of families, and a lot of it has to do with cost. So, what can we do to build private partnerships? What can we do with corporations to help? Can we incentivize them to have on-site daycare, for example? In small businesses, can we help them provide childcare solutions to families or childcare assistance? Can we as a state, if we have this many working families in the state, what can we as a state do to help keep that going while also supporting the families in the communities where they live, right? And so small towns, rural communities, can we increase spots? One of the things we've noticed is that people who work in childcare can't afford childcare. And so, what can we do to boost their salaries so that they'll stay and actually provide more consistent care for kids? I know Republicans have a lot of ideas on how to increase childcare costs, and most of them just involve more kids and less experienced providers. And those options really are non-starters for us because more kids might not be safer. Let's make sure that we're creating an environment where people want to do this work, and that means increasing their pay. And also where we've got, qualified people, treat them like the professionals they are by giving them the salary they deserve.
So currently, right, I've been paying a lot of attention to these like wage enhancement programs for childcare providers for these workers. I mean, one of the challenges that operators are finding is that families are already paying a pretty stark premium for that childcare slot. At the same time, that worker is not getting paid. That worker is getting experiencing some amount of crunch, right, as they try to do what are pretty difficult jobs, pretty exhausting jobs. Where exactly is what is the state's responsibility in terms of trying to alleviate that pressure, which is, I mean, just right now is unsustainable?
I mean, I think that if we're going to be the kind of state that does the things we do, which is to incentivize business to come here, right, we have to help fulfill that promise for that business that your workers will have care for their kids while they're there. If we want to be the kind of state that values families and growing families, then we need to be the kind of state that incentivizes allowing families to work, make a decent wage, and have a place for their kids. So I think we as a state, if we're going to try to build the state we want, we can't just leave families out to dry and say, well, this is your own problem. We have a responsibility as a state to help support people's lives, and one of those things is helping them do the work that we just spent a lot of money recruiting a business to come to Iowa to do.
Iowa has a Republican trifecta in power. The minorities party ability to pass laws necessarily involves deep buy-in from Republicans in the state. I wonder, I think for folks, I live in Iowa City, a pretty blue area. And I know for a lot of folks, they throw up their hands and wonder, like, why would I pay attention to state politics when it's not like Democrats have any levers to power anyway, right? And I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
What do you tell those people, right, when they feel powerless to affect change?
Well, we certainly know what that feels like, right? There are 33 of us, and that's not enough to pass anything up here, but it is enough to stop some bad things. And it is an opportunity for us to, we provide a really important check on what the majority party is doing. And so, they made a lot of campaign promises. Our job is to make sure that that Iowans know they're not keeping them, right? Or if there are things that Iowans really care about and Republicans are doing work that is against what Iowans tell us they want, that's our job, is to point it out and say, hey, Iowans, they told us they were going to fix the economy. How does this extreme social bill help fix the economy? Our job is accountability in that space. Secondarily, we could also kill bad bills and make bad bills a little better. We were able to do that last cycle by making the child labor bill just a little bit safer for families. We still voted against it, still hate it, but we put enough pressure on them that they had to come to the table to negotiate. And the same is true with a bill to ban IVF, for example. We raised the alarm bells and the bill died. So we really feel that, first of all, you have to pay attention to state politics because state politics will pay attention to you. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Your life will be affected by state policy, whether you pay attention or not. And secondarily, we need to demand accountability from our elected officials. And if the majority party isn't doing what Iowans want, they have an alternative. They need to raise awareness now during the lawmaking process. And then in 2026, it might be time for a change. So that's our job.
And let's say that someone, maybe they hear childcare and they say, I would like to see more affordable childcare in the state of Iowa. And they're looking to get involved ahead of this session, during this session. One of the challenges, I think, for state government, right, is, if public comment, for example, right, on a bill, is limited just to subcommittee meetings that happen that, it's kind of, I know, as a reporter know, it's kind of tough to figure out when these meetings are happening, where they're happening. For someone who isn't paid to do this full time, right? I can only imagine that that's a really can lead to a sense of powerlessness, that I don't have a place for my voice. From your vantage point, right, when you're thinking about how the public gets involved, how the public can stay involved, can stay part of the conversation, what do you recommend for them to do?
Yeah, I think a few things. Reaching out to state representatives is pretty important, and letting them know what you think. Reach out to leaders as well. During the AEA cuts last session, I had, I think, 9,000 emails from people, not all constituents, who were frustrated that they hadn't been hearing back from their state rep. We need to point that out and say that this bill was overwhelmingly unpopular and Republicans did it anyway. We need to hold them accountable for that and start to really stay. You can't just throw your hands up and walk away, right? There are people in the state who need the services. We got to stay and fight. And so I tell people, reach out. There's public comment available on a lot of bills on websites. We often aggregate that information. Also let you know, just as a plug, 3 times a week during the session, we do action alerts for Iowans who want to get engaged. So on Mondays, we send out a blue alert that says this is what they're talking about this week. On Tuesdays, I do a half-hour Facebook Live where people can pop on and we tell them, here's when the subcommittees are, here's when you can come up, here's a rally, here's how you can contact people. And then on Fridays, we send out a newsletter that says, here's what we did. Yep. So we try to engage voters as much as possible during the session because it is overwhelming and we want them to have a chance to be heard.
Jennifer Konfrst, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. I think that we've got a challenging session ahead, but I see lots of opportunities to hold Republicans accountable and try to stop some of the bad stuff while we fight for everyday Iowans.
Thanks for your time.
You bet.
So, Amie, what'd you make of Jennifer Konfrst?
I really like that she's talking about a worker-focused agenda. I think that is super, super key. I've read a lot of takes about, Democrats and the Democratic aligned dissecting the election, what went wrong, what they should do.
Right.
And the best takes are really the ones that I think center working class people that are struggling, and whether or not there can be policies that you can enact that will meet their needs.
Totally.
And I think that if the Democrats start focusing on that now and making that a big part of their policy platform, like Jennifer Konfrst is suggesting, I think that will go a long way. It might take a while, especially in Iowa, but I think it'll be a good start.
Yeah, on Monday I was at a taping for a show called Iowa Down Ballot. It's a show I work on, and we had a special guest, a Simpson College political scientist, and one of the things that he kind of an assumption that he makes as Simpson College does its polling. Is that voters just only don't keep like a laundry list of priorities in brain, right? We really only have so much bandwidth, right, for kind of political messaging. In the past, right, I think Iowa Democrats have been, there's a lot that they want to get done. There's a lot that they want to tell Iowans that they're prioritizing, right? Things like everything from legalizing weed to housing affordability, which she gets to a little bit in that conversation. I was happy to hear the kind of focus in kind of her points, that they all kind of arc towards this sense that the economy is this omnipresent piece of the conversation. And if we're not hitting people in their pocketbooks, and then we're not really serving them. So I was excited to hear that from the minority leader.
That is a big piece that they're going to have to hit, because you're right. The agenda is one thing, but they're probably not going to get a lot of that agenda past being in a minority or super minority or what have you.
Super minority is hilarious.
They probably won't like me calling it that. But I mean, honestly, what you can do from that position, I think, is to just keep on the attack. Like, keep saying Republicans are refusing to do this for you. And I think if that message starts filtering through to people, that'll change minds.
That was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you like the show, please rate it, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Sign up for my newsletter at cornholechampions.substack.com. For these stories and more, go to iowastartingline.com. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. Thanks to the whole team. We'll see you with a new episode next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith.
And I'm Amie Rivers.
Thanks for listening and happy Thanksgiving.
Cook the neck.
Cook that neck. Go back. What is that? Cook that neck's powerful. That's kind of powerful. 2025. We've got to come up with like summer, like, or like 2025 year motto, right? And I think cook the neck should be in the like running for that. That's not bad.
Are you writing these down somewhere in a doc?
Oh, I've got you can't see my computer screen, but it's all just yellow sticky notes of like half baked ideas like cook that neck so that I can forever wonder to myself, what the fuck was I thinking when I wrote that down? Cook that neck? Is that anything? What is that? Is that a password to something? What could that be? But it's going there. It's going there. Amie, I'll see you later, dude.
All right, later.
Bye.